Hello, welcome to HPE Discover Barcelona 2025. I'm Kirk Resnicker, Vice President, Chief Architect, HPE Fellow from HPE Labs. In the next decade, enterprises will be built around AI agents, operate beyond the grid, and be protected with proof before trust. Quantum computing will move from theory to utility, and the next era of AI will not be grounded in only LLMs, but in physics-based AI. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Wheeler, HPE Fellow, Senior Vice President and Director of HPE Labs, and Nigel Edwards, HPE Fellow, Vice President and Director of Security at HPE Labs, and also the head of our HPE Post-Quantum Cryptography Center of Excellence. And we're going to explore what's coming next, what do leaders need to know now. Andrew, what does an agentic enterprise look like when AI is coding, orchestrating, optimizing operations at superhuman levels of efficiency?
Yeah, well, I think, Kirk, first of all, if we cut through all the hype a little bit around AI, and there's certainly a lot out there, I think, clearly, look, AI is going to be one of those transformative areas for the enterprise. And, it's not just the coding that you mentioned, but you look across all of the operations, whether you're in finance, supply chain, obviously product development, operations, like it's going to have that level of transformation across all of that. So when we look across everything, that's the kind of impact that we're looking at.
Sometimes they say history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And when I hear the agentic enterprise, I think of past discoveries when we had the adaptive enterprise. How is what we're seeing now either different or perhaps even the fulfillment of what those promises were back over the last 10 years?
Yeah, well, we were obviously, both of us, very deep into that era. And it really fit well with the era we called hyperconverged, right? Is the idea of bringing networking, compute, and storage all together so that you could seamlessly manage it, and it was efficient to deploy, and all of these great things. And it's still very much in vogue, I would say. But the difference was, I think when we first came out with Adaptive Enterprise, it was still very static, right? It was really centered on that, initial installation or rules-based and templates, right? It was all about the template. And so with agentic now, it's really moving that to the next level where it really is about autonomous operations. And, if I think about networking as an example, the networking that went into, goes into hyperconverged, it's, you're looking at, well, it's about ports and latency and signaling rates and bisection bandwidth. And now it's really about that self-evolving network, or at least that piece of it. It's not just the configuration, but it's the management. It's, automatically healing and doing proactive traffic congestion, things like that. So it's really, taking that to the next level. But in many ways, adaptive enterprise as a term, still fits pretty well.
And certainly for me, when I think one of the things we always used to talk about back then was the single pane of glass.
Yes.
And as you said, and then there was those nice templates on it, fantastic in the demo. But then when you got down to practice, you realized behind every pixel on that single pane of glass was years of engineering debt.
That's right.
And it was only good for perhaps a short period of time. And then things happen. Now, with the ability for these systems to devour APIs and documentations and then code on our behalf, suddenly that engineering debt has been wiped away. And that really ability to have that agentic fulfillment of the adaptive enterprise seems like it's tantalizingly close, which is why we want to people start having that conversation now.
No, really good point.
So we think about all that inferencing, all that energy that goes into it. Every AI outcome is information, yes. Infrastructure, yes, but also energy.
Yeah.
And we think of already a grid was strained with distributed generation, sustainable, fantastic, but without an on and off switch on the fossil fuels. When we think about this next generation of agentic systems, now we're not just inferencing once on a model, but hundreds, if not thousands of times. 150 years after Westinghouse and Edison were arguing AC/DC, we're seeing now we're straining it even at the ability of something, the concept of a grid. may even seem anachronistic. How are we preparing for the energy demand so that we can actually equitably and sustainably provide these AI outcomes to everyone?
Yeah. Look, there's no getting around it. AI consumes a lot of energy, right? It takes a lot of data to do the training. You've got, as you said, the multiple cycles of inference. A couple of data points I keep in my head just to remind me of the challenge as we in labs, kind of work on some of these problems. One of the larger known publicly, available systems that we know about, it requires 150 megawatts to run it full bore, full operation. And you start doing the math on that, depending on where this one's located, it's something like $180,000 just in the energy cost alone to run that for a 24-hour cycle. So at least in the US, where we have lots of air conditioning and everything, that could power like 125,000 homes. Mm-hmm. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of what it takes to, the energy demand that we're talking about here. So I know some of the things we're looking at, how are we addressing some of this? It's really at multiple levels, both at the hardware, the software, and the energy source itself. So, one of the, I guess, basic architectures we use today is we're doing things at the rack scale level. So that's where we're, kind of pre-configuring the compute and the networking, the storage. Where I think that goes then is now start to bring in the energy source as well and try to optimize around that. So today we deploy a lot of that rack scale. We may deploy that in something like a pod, a modular data center. Well, imagine a future where now that data center also, taps into a variety of energy sources so that it can optimize across that. So that's at the large level, but certainly at the hardware and software, we're going to see advances continue all the way from the silicon, where we're seeing other forms of compute come online, whether it's analog-based, photonic-based, quantum to a degree, mm-hmm. And then at the software as well to orchestrate across all of that. There's obviously a lot of room for improvement, and it's going to be needed, or it's simply not going to be sustainable.
Nigel, I think one of the things that's we contribute to as our labs function isn't just the technology innovation, but it's having those conversations with policy leads. Now, what Andrew's just described here, that's a national, if not a multi-regional kind of demand that we need to understand. And when we think of AI outcomes, energy, infrastructure, and information coming together first to train a model and then repeatedly to infer over it, that's becoming something where communities, companies, countries, they're going all in. And now that then raises the question of assurance of supply and actually also your domain, security. So as we think of these energy demands, is that then causing a new set of security conversations that you've been a part of that you could share?
Well, as we look at the tighter integration of IT and energy infrastructure, what it does is it increases the attack surface. So that means there's more ways in for the wily attacker. So that means we need to deploy modern engineering techniques to build these systems securely. And there are lots of things we can do, but I'm going to hit on just two. One is the choice of programming language. So it's still today the case that when performance and efficiency is required, people tend to look to C and C++. There are now much better choices. So Rust, for example, is a memory-safe language. If you choose that language, you've eliminated a whole class of bugs which have been historically exploited by attackers to find ways into the system. So you're already starting off on a more secure foundation. And the second issue that concerns me is we will need to invest to make sure our critical infrastructure is quantum secure. We can't be in a position where a hostile actor is able to take over and take down our energy supply systems.
Now let's keep the security thread going. We used to say, trust but verify. And I think your team has been inverting the order there. which is saying, how about we get some proof,
Yeah.
proof before trust? Can you lead us through what that conversation is like?
Yeah, proof before trust, or verify and then trust. Without proof, you don't have a solid foundation for trust. So the idea is that before we entrust an actor with access to our highly sensitive private data, we want to verify properties of that actor. And so one technique we're looking at is the use of trusted execution environments. And I'll take what is available today from AMD and Intel. Their trusted execution environments, before they're launched, the processor enters a special mode where it measures the configuration data and the code that's about to start executing. And that measurement is a cryptographic measurement. It's signed by a key, which is known only to the processor. That key is certified by the vendor or AMD or Intel. So you end up with a silicon certified measurement of what is in that trusted execution environment, which means that you know you can infer then the expected behavior, the correct behavior. You know you can trust it with your data. Furthermore, trusted execution environments themselves are protected enclaves. So they're protected from whatever else is running on that processor, the hypervisor, other trusted execution environments, virtual machines, or whatever else has run on that processor previously. So that silicon certified measurement gives you a guarantee of the behavior, but also that program is running inside a protected enclave. So you have much higher assurance of proof of the behavior, of proof of protection, before you give it trust and allow it to access your data.
So we don't have to earn trust, we prove it.
We prove
all the way back.
We prove and verify, and then we trust.
And that's what sometimes I remind when I'm having these conversations. Here we're using proof in the mathematical sense. I go all the way back to those first axiomatic principles. In this case, the data collected at the fab, incorporated into the devices, and then we have that chain of evidence, each step at testing and proving, at testing and proving. So we can go all the way back to silicon.
To the silicon.
For that basis of proof beyond trust.
Silicon certified trust.
Now, Andrew, Nigel just described here that confidence we can measure and build up in the infrastructure. What about the information? How do we know that the information itself hasn't already been compromised by the adversary? What does that information security for the enterprise look like tomorrow?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point and question, because we're talking about AI, we're talking about these agentic systems. If we want them to operate autonomously, human in the loop when appropriate, then you do need that full level of protection. Just like Nigel was talking about, from the silicon and the supply chain, the hardware side of it. But yes, then you combine the information part of that, because now the threat vector, if you will, you think about it, a model. Well, look, can I get into the training data? How about the inference side of things, or the model itself? So now I have that data or software side of things that is as critical as the hardware. So that's where, again, I think something like a trusted execution environment that has a role to play, but then also just the entire look, whether it's the networking aspect, whether I'm protecting that training data at rest, in transit, while it's being computed, all of that has to come together. And then on top of that is just all the models, that we're developing as well, understanding, well, what does that attestation path look like, so that you have a comprehensive end-to-end solution.
And certainly for us, when we think of that agentic enterprise, I think of my very first quality manager who taught me, and I continue to teach young engineers at our company to this day. Quality is fitness for use as defined by the end customer. And for me, when we're talking about the enterprise now, we've had fantastic demonstrations, literally just this short of science fiction, with what these AI agentic systems can generate, the most evocative images, the most beautiful prose. And yet when we're talking about a specific enterprise use, we're needing to go back and say, you have a fantastic model, but can you tell me where you got that data?
Yeah.
Can you explain why the model is doing that? And so I think as we look to this next generation of agentic systems being built up, perhaps it's not one gigantic model.
That's right.
It is that ensemble of provable models that have in their roots this attestation on the infrastructure and the information for us to gain that understanding of it is fit for an enterprise. So I can have a conversation with my board of directors, my regulator, my customers, my community. Here's what we built up to understand why we're using agentic AI technology for this particular use.
Yeah, and ultimately, can it be trusted?
Can it be trusted? Did it, does it merit? And again, proof first, trust comes after. Now, Andrew, switching gears a little bit, you already made a little side eye at the quantum computing capability. Now, we have a rich history at Labs. We were doing low-level quantum qubit development.
10 years ago?
15 years ago. That team famously put that work on the shelf because back then, they didn't see a high confidence path to enterprise value in a reasonable amount of time. But as we've have become not just a supercomputing vendor, but the preeminent vendor of the most powerful and the most efficient supercomputing systems in the world, we come back to the customers and they said, hey, I love what you do in the exascale, but for the one after that, where do I plug in qubits? So as we think about that measure of quantum utility, something we want to do, we desire to do, done cheaper, faster, or better, because we've incorporated quantum technologies, what are we seeing as that timeline, and where do we see the application for the enterprise of these technologies?
Yeah, so I think, fundamentally what excites people about the promise of quantum is certainly that problem or use case that today would be considered computationally, infeasible. And so at the enterprise level, whether that's an optimization problem or where we would, deploy systems today, be it in pharmaceuticals, drug discovery, materials design. You think about, where we deploy a lot of our high performance computing solutions. Those I think are the areas that have, the most people excited right now. Timelines, you're going to get varying opinions on this. We participate in a lot of panels. We're well connected within the industry on this one. And so, you're going to hear everything from, 2030, it's right around the corner, to those first applications or use cases, to your point, that prove, have a meaningful scientific or business outcome, to beyond that. So, there's no universal timeline on this other than we know it's coming. Our customers are asking about it. We're tracking the progression, and, our ability as we see it, quantum as a large accelerator, if you will, working towards that integration and that end-to-end workflow. And I know Nigel will have some thoughts here on, just the requirements or other things that are happening that demand that we do things kind of to be ready for one of these systems. So I like to talk about it in terms of offense and defense, and we're working on both of those simultaneously.
Certainly, we all have colleagues at Labs whose day jobs will change when we have these systems, and perhaps they're probably the soonest and the most likely to have a quantum utility application because they wear lab coats and eye protection. There's an eye wash station out there, there's a fume hood. That's the kind of applications. We think of a little bit of classical data, an exponential algorithm that we can prove can evolve without a lot of care and feeding, a little bit of classical data out as we measure those qubits, and ideally, a cheap way for us to check the answer. Because this is probabilistic, and that means you got to run it a couple times and build up some confidence. And Nigel, other than something that Richard Feynman would know and love, we have exactly one other application, and that is Shor's algorithm for factoring large integers, which is the basic of asymmetric public key cryptography. And so, how should the world be preparing, and when should the world be preparing for a post-quantum cryptographic world?
So I don't know when what we call a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, which is one that can break many of the cryptographic algorithms on which we depend for our security. I don't know when one of these will be available, but you stay secure by being cautious, by being prudent. So we need to migrate to new, recently standardized, what are called post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. And this requires careful planning. It's an evolution. Cryptography is everywhere. It's spread all over our software and firmware stacks, and it's also embedded in the hardware. And it's the cryptography that's embedded in the silicon that is a particular concern to me, because if you think about when a chip is powered on, today it loads firmware. That firmware is verified by keys which are fused into the silicon. Those keys cannot be changed after the chip is made. So it means you can't just push a software patch in the field and upgrade it. You need to replace the device. So this requires planning. It requires planning to upgrade your hardware to make it quantum secure. Now, if you look at the advice coming from government agencies around the world, what they're saying is for your critical systems, have your plans in place by 2028, and then start to roll out that upgrade and complete your critical systems upgrade by 2031. And then follow on as fast as possible with the rest of your systems, and certainly no later than 2035, have your entire IT infrastructure deploying these new post-quantum cryptographic algorithms.
And I think that's one of the things we always want to remind people. This isn't just about encrypting data at rest or data in motion. This is about identity, right? And when you think of a modern processor, I think sometimes people are laboring, well, there's just a bunch of gates and they're fine. But every modern processor is loading up that microcode as soon as it boots up. And just imagine if someone was to inject a couple of extra instructions in that microcode to send out critical information out a side channel attack. So when we think of all these things, we have to remind ourselves it's about identity. Would you want, I think of my dad's pacemaker. Would I want anyone to be able to load some new firmware into my dad's pacemaker? I don't think so. And so understanding how we protect these incredibly vulnerable systems at the edge, I don't think it matters that is it going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or never. The algorithm has been proven, so we have that confidence. We see how we might have a pathway. And I guess now that the NIST has done the work and the FIPS regulations are out, the gun's been fired, and for me, the question is moot, right? It's not when, because it is possible, because this is so entrenched in all of social systems, we have to take these steps.
Quite right, yeah.
Last topic. What's beyond the LLM? Andrew, so we talk about emergent machine intelligence, we talk about physics-based AI. What do we see coming after the LLM to add new facilities to our AI agentic systems?
Yeah, I think, look, if you just look at the development of LLMs, and where it sits today, obviously LLM starts for large language model. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, what they can do. That it initially started as a very good autocompleter, right? Now having, the last couple of years, we've seen that, slowly but surely transition to more capability. To the point where a lot of it gets marketed as, oh, you got this reasoning model or this deep research model. And again, by stitching these things together, the interaction is really quite, amazing on what they've done. But, that's really kind of the next step, or, the big step function is something we would call, more of a true reasoning capability. And I was telling someone just yesterday, it's amazing if you look at some of the top, conferences where a lot of the advancements in these AI models are discussed, whether it's NeurIPS or triple AI. Used to be, in a labs research environment, we would see something at a conference, maybe 2 or 3 years later, you would see, an outcome based on that. Now it's a matter of months, literally, where that's how quickly some of these things are evolving. But I would say, yes, that next big thing is really the advancements, the new types of models that will, really get us closer, more on that true reasoning capability versus, again, kind of the forms of autocomplete that we see today.
So moving from the inductive reasoning, the interpolation between the data points, and let's give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
These models have consumed every byte we've produced as a species.
That's another point, yes.
And now they're done, right? So we find ourselves, it's fantastic. It's like having the best ever brainstorming partner. And yeah, you guys you ever be with your friends and you're each pushing each other on, or maybe you're pulling each other back. And that's what we have now. But let's remind ourselves, every time we do that, I've heard that one inference of a large language model is about a liter of water.
Yeah.
And so when we're using these things hundreds, now thousands of times, in order to have them work in concert, we have to be cognizant of the demands. We also remind ourselves that every time we make a model 10 times bigger, it consumes 100 times as many resources.
It goes back to our previous question.
Right,
That's
so
right.
all these things. So that ability to complement the inductive reasoning, the interpolation of a large language model with the deductive reasoning, the extrapolation of a deductive, energy-based, physics-based model. I think that's what we're really, really excited about.
Yeah.
So let's close it out. We all have been in conversations with our partners and customers, and as soon as they find out they're from labs, they go, what do I need to know? What do I need to prepare for? What change is going to be gradual, and I can gradually change, but where's that tectonic shift? Where is that next opportunity or a threat? What should I do to prepare for the future? So we'll start with you, Nigel.
I'm going to come back to post-quantum cryptography because we cannot discount the threat of a quantum computer. It will require careful planning to upgrade our hardware, our firmware, and our software stacks. Cryptography is everywhere, so you need to have your plans in place by 28 and migrate your critical systems by 2031.
Andrew.
It was funny, I was just had a conversation with our head of HPE operations earlier today, and it just reinforced kind of a point I've had for a while is, look, I don't care what business you're in, what discipline, you need to be developing some level of internal expertise here in AI and how to deploy it and use it. So, there's so many resources out there that, you need some, make sure you're harnessing it, looking to see how can it, amplify, my individual contribution. But yeah, don't hesitate to get started or be fearful of like, hey, I don't know about this. Develop that internal expertise within the company.
Yeah, and I think for me it is, I'm going to go in between both of you, because I think both these call out, you need to have that native expertise. So develop that, whether it's understanding quantum algorithms and how to apply them, understanding AI principles, but then the most important thing is to then connect that expertise with the problems. I know one of the things that we worry about even within our own enterprise is someone will have a fantastic idea and they'll have the intuition that these technologies could be applied. They won't know how to take step one. And if you don't provide someone who's hungry to make a change with those tools, they're going to go somewhere else that does provide those tools. So for us, it's develop that capability, but then also develop the community necessary to connect people with really great ideas with really great technology.
I think it's a good one.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us here at HPE Discover 2025 Barcelona.